making Republic the 7th largest vocational fleet in the nation. So Richard, we like start right away. Ready?
Thank you. Yeah, appreciate the opportunity to be here and looking forward to the conversation.
Awesome. So it feels like fleet electrification is having a huge moment right now. Some of the nation's largest cities, let's say New York, is looking at putting 30,000 vehicles on the road. The federal government just announced that they're planning to electrify 640,000 vehicles. I know we in the city of Los Angeles have a plan for over 10,000 vehicles. So we're trying to reach electrification by 2030. We also have other cities here. For example, the city of Houston, they also have a plan for electrification of their vehicles. The city of Columbus looking the same thing. So my first question to you today is, what is your take in Republic on this? Is shifting to EV a priority at Republic? And if so, why?
Yeah, I appreciate that question. So the short answer is yes. It's incredibly important to us. It is one of the top initiatives that was put forward by our new CEO, John Vander Ark, when he took over for Don Slager in his departure. We operate currently the 5th largest fleet in the United States with around 16,000 vehicles. And anyone who's kind of kept up with some of our sustainability objectives, our goals, one of our top goals is a reduction of our greenhouse gas emissions, scope 1, scope 2 emissions by 35% by 2030. And obviously that's going to come from 2 primary places. If you're going to move the needle on a fleet that size or on an operation that size, it's going to come from commitments to make better reuse of the emissions coming out of our landfills, which is a separate set of investments, and the movement to EV. And so we've been hard after that for, I think we're in our 3rd or 4th year now. And things have been moving honestly faster than we anticipated in terms of the maturity of technology, the platform overall, and the ability to put trucks on the road and learn from those real life operations.
So where is actually Republic with regarding to this progress? Are you still talking about it, or actually how many trucks you have on the road right now?
Yeah,
electric vehicles.
We are in actual operations, and I'd say we're stepping into it as the technology matures and as you're able to unlock more routes that exist around the country. We have, I'll say, pilot locations today in 2 parts of the country. The very first trucks that we put on the ground were in Hickory, North Carolina. Anyone who knows Hickory, I'm impressed. It's a small town on the down on the border, but it's got a very close proximity to one of the platform manufacturers. And so we have a couple of trucks that are in operation there. And then not long after that, tied to the Volkswagen grant settlement, we ended up with a pretty good sized grant in Boise, Idaho. And we began to put trucks into Boise. We're up to about 10 in Boise, different platform manufacturers. So we're continuing to move and engage with multiple manufacturers so that we can recognize that in a technology development environment, you're going to have different folks make different strides at different times. So I call it the mini fleet in Boise is a very good learning experience for us because it's giving us a sense for where we can stretch some of our routes and how things are finishing at the end of the day. We've been running for several years up there, primarily on recycling routes, which makes sense when you think about it, right? It's a lighter load. You're going to actually cube out before you hit your weight limitations, and that's not going to be as much of a strain on the battery overall. So that's a long way of answering your question, but the exciting thing is we're completing recycling operations up there with a excess charge. We have other trucks that are coming and needing to recharge during the day, so we know that those are not quite ready for prime time in terms of scaling and moving forward.
So we work for municipalities, we have council members who see the press releases,
Mhm.
say, well, this city has electric vehicles. So in the range, when you look at automated side loaders, rear loaders, front loaders,
Mhm.
which electric vehicle you think is ready to be placed on that route?
So I'd say the first platforms that we picked up they tended to be rear load, which was just a little bit more simplistic design overall. We are actually in the process of moving away from rear load operations as an ongoing operation, just because part of the worker challenge, the labor challenge, the exposure to those workers in some of the environments. So we're leaning in on side load vehicles on the EV project, and we've got possession of some of those as well. So we'll probably pass our rear load versus side load ratio here not long from now. We're actually getting ready to almost double the size of the Boise fleet within the next year. But both of them are giving us really good exposure to how things are going, because this is a system. You hear me talk about it as a platform. It's so much more than the battery and the drivetrain. This vehicle, our industry, is clearly one of those most complicated. It's a lot easier to step into EV for a bus or an over-road truck or something like that. The amount of starts and stops, the route density, the lifts, the compaction, all of the onboard systems play into that vehicle as a platform. And we're learning a lot when we look at how things are behaving on the rear load operation. And then when you go to the side load, where it's even more rigorous for what they're doing with the side load arm and some of the rest of the operation there. So overall, things, like I said, are moving better than we thought in terms of the maturity in each of the manufacturers of all those subsystem components. They're taking lessons learned from the operation, and they're coming back and continuing to iterate as we go forward.
Thank you for that. So let's talk economics. Are those trucks, in your opinion, affordable?
So there's no question that initial platform total cost is significantly higher. But I like to go back to the analogy. I'll date myself here. My first bag phone, cell phone, I mean, that thing was super wicked awesome, but plugged into the cigarette lighter, antenna went up, and I thought I was king of the hill. That thing was super expensive. It was insanely expensive for its time. And then you fast forward to fortunately, I'm one of those folks who carry two phones now, but just probably 100 times more powerful and a fraction of the cost in terms of a relative perspective. So I'd say, when we talk about economics, side by side, platform to platform, I'll call it diesel versus EV, you're easily a 300,000 or more delta out of the gate. Then on top of that, you have to also appreciate that you've got an infrastructure bill, right? You've got to pull electrons from the line to a transformer, and then you've got to run conduit to those parking spaces and put a charging unit in. So depending on how you step into that, that's a construction project. And if you do it once for every truck, you're going to kill yourself. But you also can't do it for the entire yard. You have to step into it in a little bit of more tolerable bite-sized chunks, and then allocate that back on top of the cost per platform. So when I throw a 300 number out there, that's including some of our infrastructure assumptions on our lessons learned and what we're doing there. But the reality is that you've got offsets for that. So depending on which states we're dealing with, obviously we're here in the great state of California, there's some nice incentives out there to try and help close that gap. So the very first year economics is not so disruptive to the contract and or a cost per home to try and step into the operation. And then there's the life cycle, the backside benefit year over year. These are completely different platforms. one of them doesn't have an engine. So your preventative maintenance and all of your maintenance program and your labor associated with it, fuel, comparisons versus electricity. So when you stack all those up and really step back and hold it up to the light, the economics right now, early on, they jump off the page at you initially. And I believe over time, as technology matures and the generations take over, just like Moore's Law on my cell phone example, you're going to see affordability fall into line. You're going to see performance improve and increase. And the need for those incentives to close the gap are going to start to fall away over a series of years.
So this point, my staff have been going around the country looking at different fleet electrification. One of the things is like the initial cost which we can cover between the HVIP in California, the Volkswagen settlement. But as you look down the road 2, 3, 4 years down, do you feel the electric vehicles cost to operate is similar to CNG vehicles, or you think the delta is going to be better?
I think in the long run, I expect you're going to see it's more advantageous in the long-term life cycle. You're going to need some length in your contracts to fully appreciate and enjoy that, right? So I have purview across the US, and as you move to the east from here, the contracts tend to get shorter in duration, which is going to limit the ability for those municipalities to enjoy stepping into this technology, because you just don't have the time to see the break even and the benefit over the course of the life cycle. So that's gonna cause some interesting thoughts and decisions for municipalities that want to be early adopters and bring sustainability into their city, and the trade-offs that they might need to make in terms of contract term.
Good point. So, okay, let's say I'm a city at the very beginning of the EV discussion. What is the best way to think about when EV could hit my city? How do I map out a strategy to decide whether to go EV? And if so, when and how?
No, that's a great question. I'm going to unpack it here. There's 4 themes or 4 topics that anyone in the room that's really interested in seeing EV come forward. So I'll step through them and I'll try and give a little perspective on why they're so relevant and how each of them is going to evolve. It's going to evolve and unlock as the technology of the platform matures. Okay, so we'll start with the platform. Okay, platform performance is a huge factor. You take a vehicle today, you fully charge, and you go out and you try and run it. And if it's not able to get through the paces of the day, and run that route, it's not ready for prime time, right? And that's heavily dependent on all those bells and whistles that are on the platform that I talked about earlier. So as the platform matures and as the battery technology continues to mature, and as the compactor and the electric motor that runs the compaction and the lifts and all of those things continue to improve, then that platform is going to become more robust, just like the cell phone example. Okay, so you draw a line in your mind of where things are versus where they're going to be a year from now versus 2 years from now, 3 years from now. And I'm talking in years because the platform today is considerably better than the platform that we looked at 2-3 years ago. Okay, so this is happening, and it's happening in a really good way. Second topic, second factor is, I'll call it route dynamics. Okay, it's a big heading over top of the route or your city, your municipality, and all the factors that go in there. Okay, right now we're running on flat terrain because going into hilly terrain is a non-starter. Right, so I'm enjoying an inner city route in Boise or Hickory, North Carolina. I'm not in Park City yet. And I say yet because, it's a matter of time, which is a function of the performance on the platform that I talked about first. Weather, right? Batteries are the big unlock. Okay, batteries, they behave like us. If you're cold, you're a little cranky. If you're really hot, you're probably not at your best either. So right now, batteries and the performance of the platform are best in good, decent climates. And as the battery improves and it can then step into some of those climates that are colder or hot, it'll unlock those other routes. Okay. The weight of the material, big factor. You hear me talk about recycling today versus MSW tomorrow, right? These batteries today are heavy. So you hopefully you feel I'm bouncing between performance and the route, but batteries are heavy, which means I have to give up the over-road payload limitation for about 3-4 tons of batteries. So I can't pick up as much before I have to break off and go dump. So as batteries get better, they'll get smaller, you get more out of the pack, and therefore you'll unlock more payload, which will open the door with other performance enhancements to get to more and more MSW. So performance, route dynamics, the third is infrastructure. Okay. Ideally, your close proximity to the infrastructure grid so that you can pull the electrons into your yard. And then you have to not only put the transformers in, but run the conduit and get ready to drop those charging stations in place. So the ability to do that is heavily unlocked through relationships with your local power provider and any other incentives that might be out there. So incentives is where I step into the fourth element, which is economics. Okay. And we've already hit on a handful of those. Economics today might feel a little lopsided, and those are offset by the incentives in some states, most predominant here in California. But as time goes on, then you're going to see cost drop as technology improves and the platform improves in its performance. And the need or the reliance for those economic incentives will fall away. The break even on comparing a diesel or an RNG to an EV will continue to come left. And that's where things will really start to pop in terms of a national scale. So those are the four elements. For anyone that's really eager, you just think in your mind, where am I in those four elements in the continuum of them? And if you're in a high terrain route environment, then you might not be ready today just by the sheer capability of the technology. But if you're really interested, and I have the pleasure of serving you, and candidly, even if I don't, if you want to lean on me and the rest of my team at Republic, we'll be happy to let you know when things have gotten to a point that they can pop in your municipality. Okay.
Well, thank you for the offer. We're going to take you on it. So now it's my time to open it to the audience. If you have any question, Ruby is looking, scanning, or if people on Zoom, they can also ask questions.
Everyone else seems shy. The question is batteries, batteries, batteries. People have been asking the life cycle of the benefits, but what do we do with all the batteries once it's over with?
Yeah.
So
I would say our view on the batteries right now, just based on what we're seeing and the performance of the ones that we have in our possession, it indicates that we will probably run the platform through its paces before the batteries need to get redone. And I think the manufacturers desperately would want those packs back because they have the ability to go through a reconditioning or a recycling process to then put them back into a future platform. So we're not seeing this tsunami of issue. I think we're going to, like any solid waste recycling truck, we run those things through their paces, and we're going to need to refresh the whole platform probably before we see a situation with the batteries, especially as they continue to improve year over year. but good question.
Hey, Richard, Chula Vista has a franchise with Republic Services. Thank you for your services. I think we might have ran on the trucks before we had a crawl. Perhaps there could be a commitment from companies like yours to convert other lower use vehicles like, cart delivery trucks and bulky item pickup vehicles, supervisor trucks,
Mhm.
and then kind of evaluate from there, and then move on to the other portion with the larger trucks. So, what are your thoughts on that? Or is Republic making that commitment to switch those vehicles?
Yeah, Manuel, great to see you, and definitely appreciate the partnership with Chula Vista. I would say when you hear me say that we have a commitment to move our fleet, it's obviously most involved and thoughtful around the platform that we're talking about now, because that's probably one of the hardest EV platforms, in my opinion, to do. I think the intent will be to continue to implement for the non-hauling, non-collection type side of the fleet. It will require a similar investment on the infrastructure side as well. I don't have sitting here right now numbers in terms of where we are, when we're going to lean harder into that. But I'll shoot that question off. So maybe by the end of the reception, I can get with you and close that out. But we have a director of EV in our company who's come from the EV industry, spent his whole life and his whole body of work in this space. And that in itself is evident that we have every intention of leaning in on this, even though we've got a significant investment in our RNG fleet. We see the way forward and the future of the organization with this kind of commitment.
Richard, thanks for the discussion, and you transitioned well into my question. I was wondering about your RNG experience. You talked about some of the challenges or the framework for success with electrification. So on the RNG side, can you share with us some of your insight and your experience? Yeah,
No secret that here in California is probably our largest, well, I would say it's easily our largest. I think every truck we run here in collection in California is an RNG truck or an RNG platform. But across the portfolio, I've lost the exact number. I want to say it's probably 30-ish% or more that is running on RNG, and we're very committed to RNG versus CNG, which ties back to some other sustainability initiatives and some other investments that we've recently announced. But as we look at moving forward, to the extent that we can move this technology from an EV perspective into a position, you'll see us when the numbers fall into place and when the unlock on different routes and different business units is there, you're going to see us start to kind of flip what we're doing. There's no question that we're still ordering and we're still deploying. We're still doing our truck replacement program with RNG vehicles as we move. And I'll touch briefly on the balancing act of implementing EV, because a lot of the places that are going to be most conducive are here in California, which means we have entire hauling companies that are all plumbed for RNG, and pulling electrons into the same parking space so that you have an RNG charging infrastructure is something you got to be really careful with. And so we will slowly step into from one foot to the other, one dock to the other, because of the engineering and the safety considerations of making sure that we do that the best way possible. If there's other facilities that have a good patch of land that we can put the EV over on and then decommission the RNG, then we'll do that as well. But it's definitely a logistics, engineering, and safety consideration for anyone that's going to be moving forward. So.
Hello, here. Oh. I am from Argentina. I was thinking that my country is considering electrification, but we are thinking in batteries at a possible tsunami because we know that batteries of plant or an acid, the current batteries have a market. The components of this battery have developed markets, but the other batteries doesn't have, and they are very expensive to recycle. There are technologies that we are perceiving that they are very expensive. What do you think about it? About the economics of recycling batteries?
Yeah, as I said before, from a vehicle battery perspective, I've had this question several times. We see most of the manufacturers of those vehicles or those large platforms, they tend to have the interest in trying to get those back, or they are working on their own logistical plans so that if you had to go have the battery packs in your vehicle replaced, they're going to have some infrastructure to be able to take that battery set and get it back from their dealership into a position that they can do something with. But that's definitely something that we monitor in terms of what we do from a recycling and sustainability perspective as a service. But I think right now it looks like most of the folks that are focused on the manufacturing are going to remain focused on trying to get some of that back.
One more question up front.
So everybody in here aware of, oh, thank you. Aware of the timeframes for a lot of these things, but it's definitely a lot of pieces to the puzzle. You know, you have the platforms, as you might call it, you have infrastructure considerations, you have grant considerations, you have routing considerations, you have fleet replacement, you got a lot of things, and all of those things are not moving at the same speed. And as in the phone example, you know, the platforms probably are the thing that's going to change the fastest over time. You know, the consideration for replacing a fleet is a business consideration, but I wondered if you would touch one more time on the infrastructure side, because what I've found in some conversations is people sometimes assume that they have a great relationship with the local entity and they can make a phone call and have infrastructure in place in, say, 3 or 4 months.
Right.
I think that conversation probably has to be started 2 years earlier because it's so complex and the impact to the geography in your facility and everything. It actually takes longer sometimes to deal with that than making a decision to test and evaluate something that is basically, I can't say a year ago, I would say, or 2 years ago, if a platform was built, it's a boat anchor or a parade truck, because essentially it is evolving faster than they can be produced. Okay. And so now it's slowing down in the evolution to the point that they're usable and testable. And so but the infrastructure thing always concerns me.
Yeah, no, I think your point is a fair one, especially as we all sit today in what I call the early adoption phase, right? This is a topic of the folks who want to step into the experience and the learning and the recognition of being early adopters and what comes with that, right? It's not all going to be, sunny and rosy. I would say all of our planning considerations are a year or more out, because we're doing analysis and early dialogue with everyone from the utility provider in terms of what do they have available, how close is it, what do we need to pull into the yard, but that immediately cascades into how much of the fleet is running routes that are susceptible to the early adoption movement, or am I talking about a small subset to start to get that business unit accustomed to what's going on. Because remember, I've got downstream, I have all the other aspects. I have to train new technicians. I've got to retool my spare parts. So you have all the tail that comes with it, which is time, like you're talking about. But I would also say, you know, it's probably not a question that'll come up, but for the municipalities that want to step into these early adoption contracts, we've got to figure out how to cover that from to be blunt, a force majeure perspective, right? Like in Florida, if I had trucks running in Florida and that hurricane rips through, then, you know, I'm going to be less likely to jump in on the investment and the contract unless we can come to some reasonable agreement on how to manage that. I might need a little bit of time to get some other trucks into the market to begin to run those until we have a solution for emergency recharge of a fleet the size of your city, right? So that'll all happen, but it's the today thought process versus the long term. And candidly, we're just super happy and excited to be in a position that we can lean into those kind of challenges. That's something our employees are really thriving on. And even the drivers that get in the cab of these EV trucks, they're pushing each other out of the way to get into that vehicle because people stop them on the route and want to take pictures and post them on social media and everything. So it's a neat time for us, candidly.
Well, unfortunately, all good things come to an end. And that's all the time we have for question. Thank you so much for being with us
Thank
here
you, Alex.
today, and we appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.